Operator syndrome. We are back. We are continuing to learn more about Steve's perspective as a chaplain during the extortion 17 incident and subsequent notifications and memorials that happened to honor those that perished. When we left off, we were talking. You were describing. Um, um, I think one of the things that stuck out to me was just the attention to detail that was paid,
Right.
um, in doing the notifications and synchronizing the movements. Um, just a general question, and from what I remember, I don't know that you did notifications uh, at any of your other roles as a chaplain, but
No.
do you think that reflects a the general standard across the military, or do you think that that's more a reflection of the command and how they approach things?
Yeah, that's a hard one for me to really weigh in on because I don't
Don't
have
have the
experience
the
across,
experience.
yeah, the broad. I can say for the command, they're just thinkers.
Mm,
They think of everything.
mm,
It's like planning on a mission,
mhm,
not unlike I'm sure what you're used to. You what if everything,
mhm,
to the nth degree to like, okay, we're ready for anything to go wrong and everything that we can possibly have any control over. And I think that mindset just carries over. It may be the case other places, but boy, you're talking about there's some sharp cookies, man. I mean, at that command, you don't get there being a dummy
mhm,
and being a goofball. It's like a lot of really intense thinking on every level, and I think that really does translate on every level, and
mhm.
something
Do you
like that. Hmm.
I can't remember if you talked about did the chaplains I'm assuming the chaplain school had some curriculum around notification of the process? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, they did. I can't get recall the specifics, but yeah,
Yeah.
they talked about being on Keiko teams and doing military funerals.
Mhm.
Yeah, there was a whole curriculum section on that. Every everything from doing a burial at sea.
Mm.
I mean, that's they do it. They do it. Um, I just I don't know, all kinds of crazy stuff. Not crazy, maybe, but just things you would never think of. Like, well, if you're going to spread ashes at sea, make sure the CO turns it upwind so the ashes don't blow back on everybody on
Mm.
the fantail
Right.
where you're doing the sermon. And like, oh wow, yeah, that's something you want to think about.
Mhm.
So yeah, they went in they went in to all of that pretty much and how to be a professional.
Did you, uh, going back to now you're in the moment, any of that really come up? Yeah, I suspect not.
No,
Um,
no way. I was a deer in the headlights like all of us were. Um, yeah, it was just a dark time. I mean, just there's no light in a situation like that. And I mean, the most haunting thing to me was when the notification was made. She just was like, "What are you doing here? What are you guys doing here?" Because she recognized two of the guys. They were um, troop members, and she's just like, she kept asking, "What are you doing here?" Well, that's just the body kicking in to I don't know what mode, but she knew. In some ways, like dress blues are the worst possible uniform to wear at 05:30 and knock on a door with five of us standing there,
mhm,
shoulder to shoulder. It's like, come on.
mhm,
There's no what we're we're there to announce you got a great medal.
mhm.
No,
Right.
it's only one scenario and just god awful. But yeah, I guess what hit me most of all was we went into the house and like I said, she is a person of strong faith, as was her husband, and I didn't know her children were young, very young. I mean, toddlers to up to about I think yeah, they were just young. She had three children,
Mhm,
and she was 6 months pregnant with her fourth. And the my hard moment came when she said, "Okay," I mean, just sobbing uncontrollably. Obviously, we're just nobody's saying anything. We're just there to hold her hand and just kind of, I don't know, be there. And then there was a moment when she kind of composed herself a bit, and she said, I appreciate you all, you guys, but can you all just step out on the on the on the front porch for a bit? I want to talk to the chaplain, just the chaplain." And I was like, "Oh, great." And we're all trying to hold it together because it's really
Mhm.
hard not to just
Mhm.
bust loose.
Yeah.
It's really hard. I mean, you see that kind of grief going on, and not to mention it's personal.
Mhm.
It is really hard. So I'm just like, come on, man, don't lose it. Don't lose it.
Mhm.
And she looked at me and she said, "Can you just pray for me? And then I just want to ask you a few questions." And it's like, of course, hold her hand and say a prayer. And yeah, the big gut punch came to me when she said, "So my kids are still asleep. What do I tell them?
Mm.
What do I tell them?" And they're young children, right? I was like, "Well, they didn't teach me that at seminary or chaplain basic training. Let me pull this one out of my back pocket."
Mhm.
There's nothing really to say. I said some words that I don't know where they came from, not from my own doing, but I said, "Well, something like he lives on," and tell them that, you know, he's a, they will, he's there. You will see him again. Every comforting word I could possibly pull, and and that's what she thanked me for later, like a year later. She said, "I told him that," and I was just fumbling. That's the hard part, because you're
Mhm.
just fumbling for words at that point, and all you want to do is provide comfort, and there's not a heck of a lot to go around. So
Mhm.
anyway, we got through it. We got through that episode. Uh, the back at the command, it was going bonkers. I mean, it was just like surreal. There were but all it this is the good side of the story. I mean, if there is a good, I mean, there's no good side to all of what happened, but there to see the resources that came to bear was astonishing. Like, there were people volunteering food 24/7. There was an entire talk set up, tactical operations center, for the Keiko teams. I mean, it was a huge room. It was like the size of a basketball court size, with all of these different stations, one station for every Keiko team. People working on travel, people working on orders, people working on funeral arrangements. I mean, on and on and on. They had an enormous memorial service at a civic center. It was like a coliseum in Virginia Beach. An entire aircraft carrier parked, and they had them in dress whites all along the street for like a mile square, just pointing people in the right direction. Like, I have never seen anything like this in my life.
Oh, you mean the crew of an
Yeah,
aircraft carrier were pulled in to help out? Oh.
like a huge section of the crew of an aircraft carrier were on the streets, like standing at parade rest, like
Mm.
guiding people and helping people. Where I don't know where that came from, but a huge video presentation. I mean, thousands and thousands of people there in Virginia Beach, and that was just a general memorial. That wasn't so. There were lots of other funeral services conducted. There was a there was a big burial at Arlington with, like, God, you can go there. When I was last in DC, I went with Kevin, and we took a photo of one of them, Thomas Ratzliff, because they're all buried together. There's like maybe 10 of them or 11. There was one casket where it was like unknown remains. I mean, that's how bad it was. Like,
Mhm.
they couldn't even identify. Uh, so there was an Arlington component, and then there were many families that just wanted their son back in their hometown to be
Mm,
buried.
mhm,
So, that was a whole nother chapter. I flew from Arkansas to Montana to Maui, Hawaii, to do funerals. I mean, it was that's where the intensity hit. Like we were working. Oh, I mean, not you can sleep when you could. It was just catching planes, flying, and then they had a change of command ceremony at Dev Group. The commanding officer was outgoing, and the command chaplain had to be at Dover, Delaware, to receive some of the body. It was like there's so much that goes on in a situation like this. Like all these caskets were coming in, so the command chaplain goes to Dover, Delaware, to receive the caskets, and that's where Obama was at that. Um, and then I was asked to give the invocation benediction for her at the change of command ceremony back at Dev Group.
mhm,
So a new CO was coming on board, and had that to contend with. Um, flying, flying all anywhere anybody needed us. We were we were just ready to roll. Um, I will say this, and I gave a plug for the Navy SEAL Foundation and for the other worthy foundations you mentioned on the Army side. For listeners out there, if you've got some means or you want to give, let me just tell you, it really does help. Here's how it helps it helps in many ways, but here's how it helps in a situation like we were in with Extortion 17. So when a soldier gets killed, right, his paycheck stops. That's it. His family goes on, right? They've got bills to pay, they've got rent to
mhm.
pay. The paycheck stops at the moment he's killed in action. Now you chalk it up to bureaucratic craziness, but there is a gap there where they don't have any money coming in. And it takes a while for the insurance and all that to kind of get replugged in or whatever you
Right.
call it. The Navy SEAL Foundation, man, they kicked in amazing amounts of money when it was really needed for families, and that was it. One of the cases was they could the travel people at Dev Group are best of the best. Like everybody there is, they're just really good. They won't put up with you if you're not. But I couldn't get a flight to make a funeral. It was some kind of glitch. They couldn't get a flight. And somehow in the military bureaucracy, they couldn't pay for like a business class flight. I don't know what the rules are, but it looked like I was going to miss a funeral. Navy SEAL Foundation said, book a business class flight. We'll pay for it. We'll gap it. Um, and they did it. And I was on the plane. I made the funeral. Amazing,
Mhm.
right? There's so much in those of you who've dealt with the military, you know this, but those who haven't, it's such a bureaucracy that there's all these catch-22s and hitches where it's like, are you kidding me? This is like an important thing. But they're like, well, pub whatever, mock mod, blah 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 says that you can't do it that way. It's like, are we really? So the foundations really stepped up to the plate. The Navy SEAL Foundation was huge, and food flowing constantly, like really good food. That place, it ran 24 hours a day. The talk I'm talking about at Dev Group. So you're rolling out. You come in. You're like you check with your Keiko station to see where you needed to go, and they'd be like, "Oh, there's fresh food over here. Here's your ticket. All right, let's go." So yeah, I guess the great story of all of that was just the logistics, and you can't imagine trying to overcome that. So we were going all around. Arlington was that was the largest piece. So there was a procession and then a burial, a caisson there at Arlington with all of these, like I say, 9 or 10 caskets.
Mhm.
Admiral McCraven was there. I think he was a 3-star at the time. No, 4-star. uh, dignitaries from DC. Yeah, it was just it's unbelievable. And then we flew all over the country, just trying to you know make funerals that were back, like I say, Arkansas, Montana, Hawaii, people who wanted their next of kin buried there where they were from. So it was 2 months of like full on, you know, not a lot of sleep, which is fine. I mean, to talk about not having any sleep makes me feel guilty already. I'm like, man, these families are suffering
Mhm.
on a tremendous level. What am I talking? I don't have anything to complain about. But yeah, it was a long road of healing and a lot of counseling, a lot of talking with families. And it's, as a chaplain, I got to say, the challenge as a chaplain was, I think at the end of the day, it's knowing what to say and knowing what not to say. There's, I sense that because you have family dynamics you're dealing with as well. For example, one family, not to get into specifics, one family was very religious in a kind of, I mean, they were very, very serious. Their son who was killed was not, right? So they wanted things to go a certain way. And their other son was not religious at all either, who survived, the brother of the guy who was killed. And he was just a really good guy. And I could tell I'm walking a tightrope here because I've got the cross on my collar. So I could feel the pressure of the family to want me to take this hardline view of their faith. But I got, talking to the teammates, talking to other guys, I could tell that, you got to be, compassion has to go in two different directions. And it was really tough because the family was wanting me to take a hard line, like where they were coming from. And
Mhm.
I'm like, no, I, I mean, I respect your faith and all that, but I also got to comfort your son whose brother was just killed and your son's wishes, which were not exactly aligned with yours. I got to do it all. So it's kind of like this real finesse act. One
Mhm.
one of the other crazy things that happened, we had to fly to a funeral in the middle of Montana. No, Utah, sorry. Utah. So we flew into the only it was a whole bunch of us. Like there were squadron guys, a bunch of them. There was myself because I was the chaplain representing this one. It was a service out in the middle of nowhere. And we flew in to an airfield in Colorado, and they had tour buses. There were two tour buses waiting because that's how many of us there were going to support this funeral. And this is kind of a funnier story to try to lighten it up a little because there's so much heaviness going on. And we're just talking, having fun, and there were like six state troopers to escort. They knew, they had been informed as to who we were and what was going down. And the state troopers escorted these two buses, like from because we were going into Utah from Colorado. And I mean, they just like had their lights on. It was like my moment of rock star status. It was like, wow, this is pretty crazy. But before we got to the town where the funeral was going to be held, it was in a dry county. Like I know this, for those of you out there, there are still dry counties in this country. I live in one. You can't buy alcohol. Wow. You can buy it 15 minutes up the road, but you can't buy it here. So anyway, whatever. The state troopers stopped at this town, the last town before we got to the dry county, and we were like, "Why are we stopping?" And one of the state troopers got on and said, "Hey, guys, we know what you're going through. Just so you know, this is the only liquor store anywhere around where we're going because you can't get liquor." and literally they stopped the traffic on both sides of the street, and guys are just piling off the bus going into this liquor store and coming out with cases of beer and Jack Daniels and everything, just because, yeah, it's part of dealing with it. And that was the
Mhm.
funniest thing. People were coming out of like McDonald's, and they're like, everybody's filming it on their cameras, like, what is going, who are these people? But it was like another just example of just how, what a almost national, well, it was a national crisis, right? But all of the people that fed into just helping support everybody getting through this. God, I've never been through anything like it. And it, so many stories to come out of it. So that's a lot.
You're dealing with, in a lot of ways, over those 2 months, it sounds like you're dealing with the mechanics of laying everyone to rest honorably,
Yeah.
um, and that's a big part of your job. You mention you mention, um, their teammates that are back. Um, Obviously, another big part of your role as a chaplain is the counseling part, right?
Hmm.
And so it would seem that initially your focus is on the family members who you're dealing with as you're making the notifications and the arrangements. Um, did you find that you were also needing to engage in the capacity of a counselor um, to the folks who remain behind, the operators who remain behind? Was that like, was it kind of, okay, first deal with the families and then now start to turn your attention to the operators who might need some help?
Yeah, for sure. I think I think once we got past the funeral phase, that was just kind of like, it's like going into operation mode. Everybody does what they got to do to get
Mhm,
through all that, and they compartmentalize and all that. But yeah,
mhm,
in the months after, in the time afterwards, it was a lot of heaviness back at the command. Just a lot of heaviness. A lot of counseling, a lot of fractures I saw. Well, not fractures, but I saw a lot of cracks in the surface of a lot of relationships come up. Um, I don't know if it was coming from a basis of fear or just the gravitas of such a huge thing. It's like, okay, well, we've been suppressing this, but now let's talk about it.
mhm,
I remember I had in my office there, off of the command chaplain's office, I had like a whiteboard calendar, and people could write in. I would have my times when I was available, and it just like lit up
mm,
with, I mean, so much stuff started coming out. Um, we were doing a retreat for families, a couples retreat, well, husbands and wives, not kids. And the chaplains had sponsored this at the Great Wolf Lodge there in Virginia, at a place in Virginia, and that was a big deal because it was a time for them to just decompress, be together, and we have little sessions and all of that to like help, talk about this, talk about that, get issues on the table,
mhm,
and everybody was looking forward to it. And I got to look it up. It was August. Well, I don't know. It was right around the time of the memorial. A freaking hurricane comes in.
mm,
A hurricane hit town. So we got to deal with a hurricane, on top of everything else, and trying to counsel these families. And it's like, are we even going to be able to get out of town? And this was west of the Virginia Beach area, but we had like haul ass to get out of there, but to beat this hurricane. Then the other thing was dealing with command members. Like, oh boy, there were some high level command members, including the outgoing commanding officer, and they were really struggling. They
mm,
were really struggling, and they don't like to ask for help. per se.
Sure.
I get that. I get that totally. Um,
Well, in a situation like that, they're gonna think well, it's not my place to barge to the head of the line of folks
yeah,
who need help here. Like
right.
first the families, then any of the
Yeah,
guys that were in that troop, and then that squadron, whatever. Like everyone's gonna is gonna line themselves up appropriately if they even feel comfortable asking for help in the first place.
yeah, yeah, for sure. The commanding officer at the time, the outgoing one, it overlapped like the time. It was a crazy time because you had all these convergences. It was like you have a change of command, you have a hurricane coming, you have this situation with extortion 17. And so I remember I just tried to keep checking in with the commanding officer because he was the commodore of Group 2 when Operation Red Wings went down
Mm,
years earlier. And he was crushed. I could tell. And a good dude. I mean, just really cared. And I remember I would pop by and just check in. That's the thing about a chaplain. You can always just it's an open door policy to the commanding officer and just say, "Is everything okay? Do you need me to do anything?" Just real quick. Like,
mhm,
and he said, "Yeah, sit down. I don't understand." He goes, "I you know, I've been through this with Operation Red Wings." And there was real heaviness in his when he said this to me. He goes, "I've been through this with Operation Red Wings." And he goes, "So," and he's just like, "What do you say? Like, how did you get so unlucky to be in this situation?" He goes, "I guess I was the chosen one to have to deal with this." I'm like, whoa. I
mhm,
think he almost felt cursed or something like that. It was just just the best guy, you know. I don't
mhm,
those kind of situations were the hardest for me because there are no answers, there are no explanations.
mhm.
Everybody's doing their very best, no question. And then there's these things that just descend upon us and it's like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't there's no words. So I guess that was the biggest challenge of all of it for me was I realized there's times where I just don't open my mouth because there's nothing to say. And that's frustrating because you want to provide, you're there to provide consolation. And yeah, I know I did in some measure here and there, but eh.
I mean, being a person there to listen is huge, you know?
Yeah.
I think all of us know that there are some questions that there aren't answers to, and think if you think about the other way it coulda went is you coulda had you know, some random scripture memorized in your
Oh,
holster and pulled it out and say, "Well, let's talk about,"
oh no, no. Yeah.
Deuteronomy, and that would have been the maybe that's useful in some times, but,
Yeah.
not useful then, and just being there to listen to him and for him to be able to say the thing that anybody would think in the same position that I'm sure a lot of those people felt like, "Why us again? Why this again? And why those guys?" Right? Like,
Yeah.
to say it out loud, it if it just living in your head, it rots you out. It can rot in there, but if you say it out loud, I'm not saying that it makes it go
Right.
away, but it can be helpful to tell someone. So,
Yeah.
I'm sure they did get a lot of comfort out of those interactions. And for you to be doing what doing what you do best and going around and seeking out those moments where you could attempt to be helpful. I mean
Yeah.
that's great. What else could anyone ask of you?
Yeah. The best, you just feel so like I say, helpless is the only word I have to say. But to hear from other people, both command members as well as family members that, well, God had you here at the right time, things to that effect make you
Mhm.
feel at least, well, at least I did something. At least, yeah, like you say, I was a shoulder to cry on, an ear.
I'll ask the question that anybody would be anyone that listening to this is gonna think or ask. So, how do you how have you how have you worked through your presence in that unit at that time, in the nick of time, right? Some might say, your life leading up to that. Have you thought much about the we'll say coincidence about you showing up there for that and being there?
I've thought about it. I
Mhm,
I I don't have any words. I don't have any words for it other than that. Yeah, it's pretty trippy. It's pretty if you want to say divine. Yeah, that I was there at that moment. Yeah, Kevin, a friend of ours, has always said, man, you could you couldn't have shown up at a better time. And I had the good moments were like when we were on that bus headed out to Utah. you know, One of the assaulters comes up to me and goes, "You kidding me? We got a team guy chaplain." He was like high fiving. It was a lighter moment,
mhm,
and like, hey, Dev Group does it right, right? They, we were, kind of just tongue in cheek in it, but it
mhm,
was like he was really happy, and that was a night. He's like, "We're going out to the desert tonight to celebrate," and I mean, they're talking party. He goes, "We're going to the spirit world, chaps. You coming along?" I'm like, "Oh boy, I don't know. I'm getting too old for this." But we did have moments where there was some just total solidarity, and was just like, "Well, whatever, we'll get through it um, together, like we do everything." And yeah, I just yeah, as a kind of concluding kind of thing, I've never seen such solidarity in my life than the coming together of all those resources. I don't. I think, I like to think that everybody could have pulled it off, but boy, oh boy, this was something else to try to get through. And of course, families are going to be suffering forever from this. There's
mhm,
no ultimate, you know, final capstone on it. It's just to see it at work and see everybody just focus on everybody else. It was one time now that thinking about it, that was probably the highlight of it all for me is that it's one time where I didn't see a single person that I saw that was wrapped up in themselves. It was oh Lord, how do we help families and how do we help everybody else, including our brothers? Man, those guys were so torn up. I saw the toughest dudes in the world. I mean, tough dudes, assaulters, bawling their eyes out, and rightly so. But I mean, it's like, whoa, you're too tough. I mean, my thought was, you're too tough a guy to be crying that hard. But of course, that's not the case. It was just the human emotions
mhm,
and people that, yeah, this group, this troop that went down. They had some mojo that must have been special because everybody said it. Everybody I talked to said those are some special guys. I mean, we all are in the general scheme of things, but I think they've been through some stuff and they lost some guys. They just overcome a lot and were such a capable fighting force. I mean, I listened to some personal stories at the funerals told by the two guys who survived from that troop, who one was home the birth of a daughter or a child, and then the other for surgery. And they told some stories just in their honor, um, that were I couldn't believe it. Like they went into some hornets' nests a lot, and yeah, I think that's the last kind of thought I would say is that it hits you so hard because you don't expect your elite fighters to die. Why we don't expect that, I don't know, but it doesn't happen that often. Like where a whole bunch of people get killed. You lose some here, you lose some there, but they're so successful night after night after night after night. They're going after bad actors, and they always come home and they always do the mission Nobody usually gets killed. And then this happens, and it's just like, well, what was that? So,
Mhm. Well, thank
yeah.
you for sharing, um, that story, um, and, I think it'll be a help. I think it's helpful for a lot of folks who are experiencing grief, whatever way it comes. But we'll pick up there in the next one. So thanks again, and for everyone else, we'll catch you in the next one.